All right.
Guys, can I ask a question before we start? I still can't see you.
All right, so thank you so much for joining us for the second session of this month's Sheva Educators Forum. My name is Mackenzie Adams. I know most of the people on the screen, so that's very exciting for me. I'm the Assistant Director for the Sheva Center, and I am so excited to introduce Robin Brous to you all, our presenter for the day. We are going to be talking about meaningful morning meetings in this session, and Robin is the Associate Director, Executive Director at the JCC of Central New Jersey, where she also runs the Early Childhood Services Department. And when she's not busy running the J, she is also helping us serve the field. She is a member of our Sheva Center faculty, and we are so grateful to have her today. So Robin, take it away.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Hi, everybody. It's so much fun to see you all, especially since I just saw many of you a few weeks ago. So I want to tell you a few things before I begin. One is that little mute button on the bottom left of your screen. Feel free to unmute yourself and talk and respond during this presentation. I am by no means any expert in anything I'm going to say. The only thing that makes me at all qualified to give this presentation is basically because I have lots of thoughts about it and many years of experience in struggling through culture change in our school here in Central New Jersey. So this is a time when not only can I share some thoughts with you, but we all can share thoughts with each other. So I wanted to say that. The next thing I wanted to say is that I'm going to share a couple of videos with you. One is easier to hear than the other. I apologize in advance, but you'll get the drift once I begin the presentation. So the topic we're going to be talking about today is the whole idea of morning meeting or morning gathering, and creating a sacred space or creating intentionality in what we choose to do with that time together as teachers and students and educators. And in order to approach this topic, I want to just share that I did two things. Number one, I felt the need to do some research on what was formerly known in my world as circle time. And the other thing I did is engage the help of a college intern that I'm working with. Her name is Jaylene Gonzalez, and Jaylene is studying at Montclair State University in New Jersey, and she did some of the research with me to prepare for this presentation. And although she can't be with me on the screen today, I wanted to give Jaylene credit and kudos for thinking with me about this presentation. So let's dive in and let's talk about circle time. So unbeknownst to me, circle time started a really long time ago. Actually, circle time started when kindergarten started, and Friedrich Froebel, a German educator, was the one who originated the early childhood program that we now call kindergarten. At that point in time, children didn't go to school until they were over 7 years old, and Froebel had acquired a parcel of land from some local parents who wanted their children to be engaged in learning. And he basically just allowed children to explore this parcel of land and observe nature and live in the natural world and ask questions, hence the name kindergarten, children's garden or garden. And he really approached education from two perspectives. He wanted the learning to happen biologically. He wanted children to be able to really see and touch and understand the natural world. And there was also this spiritual perspective that he brought to everything he thought about. The two things that he really stood for is the idea that children are creative beings and should be given the opportunity to learn creatively, and that play is the engine of real learning. And Froebel's influence is actually still seen today, because the original circle that started circle time was an activity that Froebel used for children to play and learn together. In Froebel's kindergarten, children and teachers, starting with Froebel, actually formed a ring and participated together in singing and movement games. And he used this as a way to wake children up to the possibilities that existed in the world. So this idea of starting each session with this awakening or waking up, and that's how the day began in Froebel's kindergarten. He also felt that it would help children become alert and focused, all the while appreciating the natural world and reinforcing that there was a community. So linking their hands together and forming a circle for Froebel really created this opportunity to create community. Then there was another influence that I had never heard of. His name is Murray White, and the graphic that you see is the first edition of Murray White's book called Magic Circles. And Murray White was the first British author to publish a book on circle time, and his first edition was published in 1980. And the whole idea of circle time in building self-esteem actually became very popular in the 80s. And this book was aimed not only for teachers to help children and activities designed to help children develop esteem, but it was also designed to help adults develop self-esteem. And Murray White looked at things like individuals needing to feel secure and a sense of identity and belonging and purpose and all of the things that are listed on the left-hand side of your screen as really important to help develop imagination, improve concentration, and increase self-confidence in the learners. Why do I bring this up? Because these two early influences, I think, and I have learned, are really important in shaping the way that actually many progressive educators think about this morning gathering, even in our times currently. So if you ever have an opportunity, check out The Magic Circles by Murray White. The newest edition has a much updated cover, and there are actually CDs with some guided imagery along with the series. I have not listened to them yet, but I have read some excerpts of his book, and it's kind of timely, interesting stuff. So I offer that up to you for some consideration. So just keep in mind that both Froebel and Murray White, in their understandings and their thoughts about, and their early thinking about circle time, talk about awakening, talk about the world around us, talk about who the individual learner is and the uniqueness of each child, each individual in the community, and also the idea of working within a larger community. And we're going to come back to these concepts, but I just wanted to sort of tie them together because it was fascinating to me that these concepts and these ideas were around much earlier, and that circle time has actually developed into something quite different, in my opinion. So now I'm going to give my intern, Jaylene, some kudos and credit because I asked her to tell me a little bit about what circle time is. And she really was doing a pretty comprehensive research job and pulling a lot of concepts together. But basically, she came to the understanding that in circle time, or what is traditionally been known as circle time, the whole group takes part in activities, The children are, in this source, it says, have yet to develop social, emotional, and communication skills. I would argue with that. And that circle time really is aimed at helping children develop positive relationships between children. I could argue between children and adults. That circle time helps give children tools for engagement and listening. I would agree with that. And also allows children to negotiate relationships as adults. I would also add to build relationships with important adults. But when Jaylene did all of this, she learned that circle time, that there are 5 key skills that are supposed to develop out of circle time: thinking, listening, looking, speaking, and concentrating. And one source stated that without circle time, children would not develop these characteristics or skills. Again, I think that that's a narrow view of something that has a lot more potential. Jaylene was also asked to let me know what happens during circle time, and the first bullet point is bolded because she and I couldn't believe that anyone would write this. In one very credible source, it was noted that it's not a time for children to chat. And that was a big, big, big red flag for Jaylene, who is a student and is learning, and looked at me and said, "Robin, that's not what happens in our school." And of course I answered, no, it's not. And this is precisely why I am engaging in developing this, this little talk with colleagues around the country, because I think there's so much more opportunity. And I think that the idea of a very teacher-directed, very structured, very regimented circle time is not in keeping with developmentally appropriate practice. It's not in keeping with how to build authentic relationships with children as learners, and is certainly not in keeping with my own educational philosophy. And I know so many of you, and I know you're kind of nodding and you feel the same way. Not going to go point by point. You catch my drift, yes? So thank you to Jaylene for doing this research and for being astute enough to understand what the difference is between our school.
We have a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm not sure what the ratios are at the other JCCs. We typically have about 2 teachers to 16 students roughly. 18 in some of the older classrooms. It depends. As I'm sure a lot of you experience, like I personally work with 3-year-olds. And when we're doing our circle time and I ask for some feedback and want to have a discussion, I'm sure you guys have probably experienced, you know, the everybody wanting to get in, and like if one person talks, everybody wants a turn. So I notice in these pictures and some of the things that I'm reading on the screen, you know, you have 6 kids in a circle or you have 10 kids in a circle. For those of us who have a much larger number than that, how do we keep the circle time within a reasonable, you know, like an age appropriate amount of time where everyone gets to participate, but when you know, have that many kids?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for asking that question. So let me clarify by saying that so far in the presentation, the pictures that you're seeing are not from my school. The pictures that you will be seeing in a little while and our classrooms are anywhere from 12 to 18. And I can tell you for sure that there's no one way to engage 14, 16, or 18 children in a meeting time or a circle time without some intentionality and setting the stage for it, which I'm absolutely going to touch upon. I also believe that it is very much a process and a way of thinking and imagining the types of activities and the types of goals and the types of conversations that you want to engage in circle time or morning meeting. I prefer to call it morning meeting, and I'll explain why. But your point is very valid, and it's very difficult to go from what many educators in our country are doing right now through a traditional circle time model to a much more truncated, shorter, more intentional morning meeting construct. Our school started to think about this around 10 years ago, and we started to ask a lot of questions and make some decisions about what was and was not important to us as educators. And that's kind of where it started. We also realized that the time many teachers were requiring children to sit was way too long. So it really depends on what you want this meeting to be, how you want the children to interact in the meeting, and what types of interactions you want to have happen. And I think as we move along, you may get some of your questions answered, but keep asking them. And certainly an hour is not enough time. It's taken me 10 years to work in this way with my faculty. But certainly I'm happy to always talk offline and think together, if that's helpful. Yes? Okay. So let's move on just a little bit. This is a slide that just talks a little bit about how circle time has become a very commercial sort of activity. It's evolved as a place where teaching is done and academic constructs and concepts are introduced. And in many cases, educators that are working in a traditional way are using this as a teacher-directed time to teach numbers and colors and alphabet in a very regimented, structured way. That wasn't what it was originally meant to be. And when you look at a typical curriculum model for circle time, you see that the time, and this is, again, credible sources, 20 to 50 minutes in some cases, calendar, weather, groups, songs, chants, so on and so forth. You get the drift. And the objectives are things like we want to introduce new ideas and have children sit for 20 to 50 minutes so they could learn things. We want to help children follow directions, develop routines, understand their body and space, and so on and so forth. And I would say that there are many parts of those objectives that may be very relevant to a meeting time or a gathering time. But if you read one of the NACCE Young Children magazines that was published in 2008 around the topic of calendar study, and again, at the end of the presentation, I have a resource page happy to share so that you can take a look at these materials. One of the things that they point out is that while as adults, we mark time with calendars and schedules, there is little meaning and connection for children who are ages 2 to 5 or younger, who are in many cases forced to routinely count the days, the numbers of days and the days in the week and the corresponding numbers and so on and so forth every single day at school. And the same goes for weather prediction. Early on in my career, when I taught 4-year-olds, I had a weather chart, and we sang a song about what's the weather today. And there were children who had to go and put the right clothing on the little felt board on the weather bear or the weather person or the weather something. And we said, can you predict? Can you tell us what the weather is? But in reality, those same children had already walked into our school building with coats on. They knew it was cold out. They walked through the snow, and we're asking them again to repeat it and to perform this routine. And so To me, that seemed, and this has been an ongoing topic for many years, it seemed very irrelevant. I thought it needed to be more meaningful. I thought it needed to be reimagined in our school. And so we started to do that. And in order to reimagine, I wanted to show you an example of what I'm talking about in a more traditional circle time. This is the video that I referred to earlier as a little bit annoying. And I apologize in advance if anyone in any of your schools are doing some of these activities. The activities themselves are not offensive to me, but in some of the ways that they're being delivered and some of the ways that they're being seen by the children and experienced by the children is a bit disturbing. And after combing through lots of YouTube videos on circle time, this is what I found. So I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes, jot down a few notes if you'd like, make note of what you see, and also maybe what you don't see. So take a second and check this out.
Okay, so we're gonna do our.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're gonna do our calendar so we can figure out what day of the week it is. Okay. So ready? We're gonna do our months first. Ready? Everyone do it. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Good job, Jenna. Then you turn around. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Then you turn around. Last time. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Then you sit back down. Yes? Do you remember, Massimo, what month it is? What month is this? Do you know? Not September. September is over. October is over. What did September say loud? November. Everybody say November. Good job. It's the month of November. Okay, so we're going to do our calendar. Let's go! Sing it, the number one. Sing it, Marissa. Let's go! We're going to count. Come on, ready? Get your numbers out. Come on, Stacey. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Good job. What day is it? Thursday and it's Friday, and then it's Saturday. Days of the week. Days of the week. Days of the week. Days of the week. Days of the week.
Okay. Let me hear from you. Take your muting off.
I think we all had some stuff. You wanna start us off?
First is not a circle. Let's start with it. They are not sitting in a circle. They are sitting but not in a circle. And the teacher needs to sit with the kids and not above the kids.
Thank you. Thank you. So they were not sitting in a circle, they were sitting in a semicircle.
And we agree completely. The most important is the position of the teacher is facilitating and engaging. She's supposed to be on the level of children. And the assistant is obviously completely separated from the children at all behind the piece of furniture. So she's not with them.
Other thoughts?
There are no
really
jobs for the kids.
Sorry?
There are no jobs for the kids. It's on the name of the teacher. Usually
I thought it was, the kids were very like placid. I mean, that seemed like an easy thing to get them up and moving and involved in it rather than just the hands.
That's what I
But you can tell they were antsy and they wanted to get up and move.
They just repeated the movement after the teacher. If you saw, she was very limited in ability to engage them. So it's what she did.
Right, right.
Also, she was screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Screaming
it was so
and
loud,
screaming.
there was no room for kids to be involved in any way.
Right. There was no opportunity for conversation. And when a child started to ask her something, she didn't even listen to the child. She was really insistent on getting her routine done. And nothing was going to stop this teacher. I can go on and on. I have watched this many times. I could talk about the children that weren't engaged. I could talk about the environment that is a bit overstimulating. I could talk about when you say to the children, turn around and sit back down, how could they sit back down when they're already sitting? And the number rock and the louder the better, and ignoring that little girl up in the front who was standing the whole time. And there was a lot, but you catch my drift, right? So I felt as though showing you that would then lead to, oops, nope, I'm not going to show you again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're going to move along. So this leads me to something else really interesting that I wanted to share with you. So many of you have read, or if you haven't, I highly recommend that you should, a great work called Working in the Reggio Way by Julianne Worm. Julianne Worm wrote this book for American educators, and it's a really, really concise and wonderful explanation of ways that we can think about seeing children as competent and capable learners. Well, there was a conversation between the author, Julianne Worm, and an early childhood educator. The teacher was actually struggling on how to present a particular lesson at her morning meeting time. And Julianne Worm, after speaking to the teacher for a few minutes, said, "Why does it have to be a lesson? Can't you just talk to the kids?"
Yeah.
And it was that suggestion and that question that the teacher reported really helped her take a big turn on the way she thought about her meeting time. From that day on, she said, she continued to hold a morning meeting that was made up of lists of things that she wanted to talk about with the children, whether it was a problem that they were having in the classroom, whether it was something she heard, something she experienced on her own, some classroom situations that needed to have conversation around them. But she found that she was keeping lists and lists and lists of topics to bring up at her morning meetings to just talk to the children about. And as a natural outgrowth of those meetings, she learned a lot about what her children were thinking, and she learned a lot about what was happening in her classroom community, and it actually led to projects that were following morning meeting and were being planned during work time for the students. And when this teacher told Julianne Worm about her experiences, she said, "I think that this has become the heart of my program. I see the relationship with the children changing and the learning experiences developing in a more natural and organic way simply because I started to talk to the kids at morning meeting." And it was so simple, right? So here she was trying to figure out what to do with a lesson, and Julianne Worm just reframed the question back to her. And that's something that we've thought about here over the past 10 years. We actually changed the name from circle time to morning meeting. We did so intentionally because we thought, well, adults go to meetings and they're important. And if we change the name to morning meeting, we can make it important for children too. It was important to note what the time was going to be used for and how it was going to feel and how that experience was going to impact children. So what I want to do in the next few minutes is share what I believe are some of the very, very important components of that time and things that we should think about. First and foremost, in order to change the culture of the morning meeting, which could ultimately change the culture in your classroom, and I would argue even in your school, the first thing to do is to start to think intentionally about what you do want to change. And ask one question, and the question is why? Why do we have a calendar up? Why are we asking children to predict the weather? Why are we singing that song? Asking the question why can lead to so many amazing answers. First and foremost, we believe that in the morning meeting, we want to set the tone for the rest of the day for respectful learning. And in answer to one of the earlier questions about how do you do that with so many children, there are so many ways. There are ways of modeling, there are ways of speaking to children and having children speak to other children, and again, not turning on a light switch and having it happen immediately, but setting that tone so it's what children come to know and expect during their morning meeting time. We also want to establish a climate of trust in the morning meeting. That's a place where children can bring so much. It's a transition time. For many, it's first thing in the morning. In some of our classrooms, it doesn't happen till a little later in the morning. It's used as more of a gathering to do some work planning. But establishing a climate of trust does help children transition to their day. It also helps children express their emotions and their challenges and their fears that they may be having. And when you establish that climate of trust, you find out that children will come to morning meeting ready to express themselves. And again, it happens over time, and especially for our nonverbal learners, when our 2-year-olds come in, we find other ways to have that happen, whether it is using materials so that you can show children things, or using pictures, or different activities, because those children are obviously not speaking in full sentences yet. In the morning meeting, we want to motivate students to feel significant. We want them to know that each and every one of them is unique and has something to offer to the classroom community and to each other. We want to create empathy, and we want to encourage collaboration. So meeting time can be times where we think together, and we feel sad if one of our friends is sick, and we feel happy if we're celebrating, and so on and so forth. And it goes without saying that that's a key time of the day or in any classroom experience to support any kind of social learning, to support emotional regulation, and to get the content and the cognitive piece going. It's kind of a microcosm, in my mind, for what happens during the rest of the day in the classroom. The stage is really set during the morning meeting, and it can be a really powerful place to set the stage. In order to do that, I believe that we need to create a space. We need to create a space almost like a living room and invite people in. A space that's welcoming, a space that's comfortable, a space that is not all that distracting and allows children to feel really peaceful and to feel calm. And, you know, sometimes I think about when we invite people to our homes for just some good conversation and to enjoy each other's company. We set up our living rooms, we set up our family rooms, we set up our kitchen, we set the table. So I would recommend creating the space with those kinds of things in mind. And for the purpose of inviting conversation into a morning meeting space, I would also say that sometimes I think about what it's like to have a conversation in a crowded, noisy restaurant. It's almost impossible. So making a space and making time that is quiet and peaceful would help children have conversation and would help the morning meeting start in a really, really nice way. I believe that in the morning meeting there should be a greeting and a time for children to greet each other and not necessarily just be acknowledged by their teacher. But you know how you feel when someone walks up to you and says, "Hi, Devin," and looks you in the eye, or "Hi, Holly," and shakes your hand, right? It's personal and it's a connection, and it's an important connection. So in many morning meetings in our school, children greet each other in a variety of ways. They could turn to their side and say something nice to the person next to them and say good morning. There might be a time in a song where they say, turn to the person next to you and give a smile, or shake hands, or pat someone on the shoulder, so on and so forth. It encourages social interactions. It's just nice to be individually greeted. We also believe that the seating arrangement does not necessarily need to be that children sit in the same place in the circle or the greeting or the morning meeting every single time. But as children feel more comfortable, it's nice for them to experience sitting next to different friends and sometimes even facing each other for parts of a morning meeting. That could be really powerful. All in all, the greeting, the saying hello, the acknowledging each other sets the tone because it signals the beginning of the day, both for the individuals and for the group collectively. If any of you have looked into or read the responsive classroom model, you know that as children get older, they can and do lead the morning meeting. And in our school, that starts to happen when they're 3 and 4, and many of our children take part and do lead the meeting, and they feel really, really empowered by being able to do just that. Then there's a time for sharing. It's a key component of a morning gathering. It gives students an opportunity to share something that may be happening in their world. It's also a time to share what they're working on in school. It may be a time to share project possibilities and discuss how those projects are going. Again, I don't believe personally that every child has to share every single meeting because that would take a very, very long time. And I think it helps children emotionally regulate when they learn that their turn will come. Does it happen at once? Again, we don't flip the light switch on. It doesn't happen at once, but it's something we work toward. When they do share, that sharing should be noted and perhaps other children given the opportunity to respond to it so that you're modeling a back and forth conversation. And it's children talking to children, just not teachers acknowledging and sharing back. There's an element of planning time where children might plan their work for the day. This picture was actually taken this past Monday after we open with Havdalah on Monday morning. So after Havdalah, this child was sharing something with his teachers and the rest of the group about something that he was working on after Havdalah that morning. So there's definitely a planning time, and sharing planning also increases cognitive functioning, metacognition for children, where they begin to think about thinking, not just the idea of the moment, but they're planning ahead and they're thinking about what they will be doing and sort of mapping it out. And a good place to do that, to increase the opportunity to do that, could be at morning meeting. depending on how you weave the work and the meeting together, because having a planning time together at as a community is also really, really impactful for children. It lets them know that their play is work and work is their play. Oops. And last but not least, contributing. Children are part of the classroom community, and this could be a time where they're assigned jobs to help the community. This is a group of our 2-year-olds that are in charge of handing out challah to other classrooms on Fridays. Not everyone may have a job every week, and jobs should be relevant to what you really need to have happen in a classroom. But whether it's taking care of pets or taking care of some plants or getting snacks together or cleaning up an area of the classroom, morning meeting time is also a time to have those members of the class or the group contribute by working on their jobs or acknowledging that they have a responsibility. And, you know, through all of this, it's really important to remember that committing to a daily gathering or a morning meeting in this way with a lot of thought and a lot of intentionality demonstrates our respect for children as narrators of their learning, as learners, and also as members of our classroom communities. So all of the things that I'm mentioning sort of work hand in hand to create a place where the child is recognized as the learners that they are. So in our school, I think I mentioned before, and if I didn't, I apologize, that at certain times, especially on Monday mornings, we bring other rituals and celebrations into our morning meetings. So this very narrow video, and I apologize because the person that took it on an iPhone. It's hard to expand, but this narrow video just shows a little bit about a morning meeting that happened in a 3s class this past Monday. And this was the morning meeting. So after the children greeted each other, this is what the morning meeting was.
Thank you, God, for the fruit of the vine. Okay, fruit? Great. Great. So to make the great juice of the wine vine. You know the lies. La 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 la. Take your bite. Thank you, God, for the sweet smelling spices that wake us up to the world around us. Give us lies. La 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 the word nation in the light. Put your hands up. Bring the light into you. Feel the warmth. Thank you, God, for the warmth and the light.
Video felt just a little bit different than the video you saw earlier. It was intended to. And the last thing I wanted to tell you that I think is really important is that when we come together for morning meeting, there's also an opportunity to welcome children to any kind of celebration. This happened to be an example using Havdalah just because this was very close to the time that I was putting some of these slides together, but it could be anything. It could be Shabbat, it could be a birthday celebration, it could be another holiday celebration or an important moment in a child's life. Bringing celebration and ritual to the community in a thoughtful way and in a morning meeting space feels really, really full of possibility and connection. I know that when we gather even as adults and we are in that circle configuration and we are in a group together and we are singing together and there's music and there's a little bit of spirituality and there's just that really, really nice, calm, peaceful feeling, a lot of amazing things happen. And just to put it all together, because I want to leave a little bit of time for conversation, back to summarizing our earliest understandings from Murray White, from Froebel, and the whole beginnings of kindergarten, the idea of in morning meeting, intentionally awakening children, inspiring them to learn and think, noticing the world around us, using the world around us to talk about, to spark conversations, whether it's to solve a problem or to bring up an idea, noticing each individual and recognizing them as significant and building their self-esteem. That came right from our friend Murray White and his early works. And also working within a collaborative community. From all of this, we can glean some important ideas. There are a lot more to get us thinking about ways to really enhance and make these gatherings meaningful. We don't have a lot of time with children every single day, and to start their day in an intentional, meaningful way brings amazing possibilities to everything else that happens for that child, for the teacher, and really within the classroom. And again, this is work that our school has been doing for many, many years. It keeps evolving. There's no one way to do it, but there are a lot of ways to think about it. And so I want to open up to you guys. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your questions and also reactions. So please feel free to unmute yourselves.
Come on.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. When do you share like the schedule with the kids of like kind of what's going on for the day? Special events.
So I would say different teachers do that at different times. Because of our state licensing, there is a picture schedule that's posted so children can see it. In most cases, the children become pretty adept at knowing what's happening by just looking at that schedule. There are times when the teachers will highlight for the children what's going to be happening next or reminding them. And depending upon the age group and the dynamic of the children in that classroom, in some cases, it's reminding them what happens right after morning meetings. Sometimes it's going through the schedule of the day and everything in between. So the basic answer is not one size fits all. And I would say that in some classes, it might not even be a huge part of the morning gathering.
Okay, so I'm sorry about my accent first. It's a Hebrew accent. In my class, the routine, we make a clock and pictures of the routine. So one of the job of one of the kids is to move the arrow from one routine to another by the pictures, like playground, snack time, circle time, free centers, mindfuls, and nap time, and go home. So it's very easy for them to go to the clock and just, twist, move the arrow. This is the routine in my class. So,
and that's part of the morning circle?
It was part of the morning circle. Now it's more routine, so we don't need to say it every time in the circle time, in the circle morning or in the morning.
Awesome. And you're giving the children that responsibility, which is beautiful.
So we have the job chart, and then on the door, so every kids know to recognize his name. I'm working with the 3 years old, so they just know how to recognize their name. So one of the job is a clock. So the clock, it's meant to move the arrow from one activity to another. So there is a lot of job, and every Monday after the Havdalah or something else, we change job. So we move the names from another job. So every week they have, so every week they have another job, so all the kids can do all the job, even twice in a year.
And that usually works well for them. I would say as long as the jobs are meaningful and are really helpful to the community, that's fabulous. That's great.
It's very simple job, like turn off the light, bring the stool, be in charge of the water if one of the kids doesn't have water on the table. First line, first in the line, second in the line, hold the door. It's very minimum. It's very simple job, but it's for them it's a lot.
Great. I love that.
So, yeah. So if you want me to take a picture of the clock, the job, and to send it to you, and you
yeah, I would love to see it. I would love to see that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had indicated before that this will be up on jcca.me. These are just some of the articles that that we used in some of the research that we did. My intern Jaylene used a lot more than this, but these were some interesting reads, especially the first one, if you're thinking about the calendar activity, the first one, the NACI publication in 2008 is a great read. And if anyone needs it sent to them before they get on, just let me know. My contact information is also available. It's rbrous@jccnj.org. Any other questions? We have a couple more seconds. So I really appreciate you guys joining me for just, an hour of looking at making meeting a little bit more meaningful. In closing, I would say that this is something that teacher by teacher, school by school, there are lots of individual thoughts and opinions about this. As I said at the beginning, I can give you the benefit of years of experience, but also years of mistakes and, relooking at things and reflecting on practices with our teachers. These are wonderful conversations for those of you who are teachers to have with each other, to challenge each other to think about. Also great conversations to be having with your school leaders as you think about ways to honor children and to honor your practices and to make sure that the work that you're doing is really, really relevant and authentic work. And that's really the whole summary of thoughts about just paying attention to this practice.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you everyone for joining us. As Robin mentioned, we are going to post the recording and the presentation on jcca.me, and we'll make sure to send the link in the next Shabbat message. And we will also be posting registration for our next Educators Forum, which will take place, I believe, on April 11th. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you so much again, Robin, and for everyone's time. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Robin.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye.